Hi, my name's Chad. I'm from London and I graduated from International Disaster Management in 2018. I now work in local government. I'm a Contingency Planning Officer for Westminster City Council. So my job involves emergency planning and business continuity management. That's corporately and for the wider borough. Emergency planning is a statutory role legislated under the Civil Contingencies Act 2004, and that had 7 duties, and I'm going to give you an abridged version of those because they're quite long. They are to assess the risks of emergencies occurring, to put in place emergency plans, to put in place business continuity plans, to warn, inform and advise the public, to share information with other responders, to cooperate with other responders, and to provide advice and assistance to businesses and voluntary organisations about business continuity management. It's a mouthful. Away from incidents, a lot of my time is spent looking at plans and assessing risks and threats and hazards, and doing mitigation work with the public and businesses. That's the warning and informing bit of the Civil Contingencies Act. I also meet with the Resilience Forum regularly. Also, as part of my job, I do a lot of work with planned events. Just for an example, in a given year, not this year obviously, we would have festivals, we'd have protests, we'd have royal ceremonies, there'd be loads of parliamentary stuff, we'd have visits from foreign dignitaries. So my job would be to liaise with the teams managing that, because there's obviously a lot of scope for things to go wrong. Whenever there is an incident though, a pandemic for example, my job is to respond directly to that. So I would activate plans and I'd ensure that those plans are being followed by whoever has to make strategic or tactical decisions about the response. In essence, you're a resilience advisor. Of course, you also get drawn into things which aren't really your job. So right now, during pandemic, I also help run a number of COVID test centres, just because I have the skills and the expertise to help do that. It's not really part of my remit. These days, I don't really go into the office that much. I maybe do once a week. I spend a fair amount of time between the test centres and the rest of my time at home. Most work is done on Microsoft Teams these days. To get to this position, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do until I think a careers day actually. That's when I found out what emergency planning was. I decided to write my dissertation on a topic that I was quite passionate about, and that's how I got my way in. So I did an analysis of the impact of austerity on resilience in London, and through that forced me to meet a load of people who worked in the industry, and it also forced me to do a load of research about resilience in London. So that was where I sort of got my foot in the door. The contacts was probably the most beneficial thing from that. I met people from police, I met people from local government, the private sector. I interviewed someone from Ernst & Young. I interviewed people from various government agencies, including the Environment Agency, I think Thames Water. It's not a government agency, but Thames Water. I had disaster victim identification from the Home Office, a load of people. And then I ended up finding about my job that I currently do through that. Someone told me to apply and I did. Originally, I didn't think I was qualified enough for it, but it turns out I was. I had quite a lot of transferable skills that I didn't really appreciate at the time. Humanitarian assistance is humanitarian assistance. It doesn't really matter where it is, if it's abroad or if it's in the UK. In terms of the modules that I did at Manchester, the ones which were most useful to me were the ones which were about socio-economics and socio-politics. I didn't really know much about those topics before I did the degree, but it's been quite useful because naturally local government is inherently political. So I've got a bit more of an understanding about why things happen and what's actually happening as opposed to what it looks like is happening. Also, the modules which looked at how regular people engage with disasters and how regular people behave once disasters have struck. That's been incredibly useful, especially during the pandemic. For example, at the start of the pandemic, I did quite a lot of work looking at how to organise volunteers. I recommend this as a way to get into the industry. So pick your dissertation topic really carefully and mould it around the industry that you want to get into. And then somehow try and meet as many people as you can who already work in that industry. I did this by just doing interviews with them. People are really willing to talk to you and really willing to help. So just have a trawl through LinkedIn, add them, talk to them, and people will want to help you. In terms of challenges that I face, local government was quite a bit of a shock actually because of the level of bureaucracy and politics. You can't really do things like you can in the private sector and to a certain extent charitable sector. You can't just spend money and start projects and things because obviously it's public money and you're accountable to the civil service and you're accountable to various other public agencies as well. Also, the things that you might think are a priority aren't necessarily a priority for your organisation politically. So there are various hurdles that you've got to jump through, which isn't the most helpful thing at times. But I understand why it happens, and I think it is important that you're accountable. Another shock was actually coming straight out of university into my job. The sudden lack of deadlines was quite startling. Obviously, you've spent years working to deadline after deadline, and then suddenly for me, I found myself with nothing urgent to do. That was quite weird, but you get used to it. For some advice, even if you get into an industry and it's not a long-term job or career that you want, this is how I think about it. It's just a really useful stepping stone to something else just because of the links that you can make in that industry. For me, from my perspective, for example, if I wanted to go into sustainable development or if I wanted to get into climate change mitigation or something like that, I've already got a foot in the door because these jobs exist in local government as it is. And I also have a lot of links with other areas. I work with central government and I work with the private sector and I work with NGOs an awful lot. So I've already built myself a bit of a network and you hear about things all the time. So I know one bit of advice would be to network. If you've got any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So get my email from HCRI, shoot me a message. Thank you very much.